Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're doing something a little bit different, but honestly, it's absolutely fascinating. We usually think of math as this collection of timeless, abstract truths, right? Just equations floating in the ether, completely detached from the messy reality of everyday human life. Well, today, we're going to completely shatter that illusion. We're using a single date on the calendar to uncover the deeply human, sometimes tragic, and honestly often astonishing stories of the real people who built mathematical history. Let's dive right into it.
Okay, here's a quick roadmap of what we're covering today. First up, a mathematical time capsule. Then, the four-color computer proof. Third, tragedy, war, and secrets. Fourth, the Mathematician King. And finally, mathematics in nature.
Section 1. A mathematical time capsule, anchoring on a single day.
Think of this first part like taking a core sample from the history of mathematics. Instead of drilling through ice, we're drilling through centuries to see what we find. Now here's a question for you. What do a Nigerian king, a tragic war hero, and a computer all have in common? On the surface, absolutely nothing, right? It sounds like the setup to a pretty strange joke, but the answer is exactly what shatters that stereotype, that math is just dry numbers scribbled in some dusty room.
The answer is June 21st. Yep, every single story we are going to explore today is anchored to this one specific date. Whether it's a birth, a death, or a monumental announcement, June 21st acts as our thematic whisper. It's going to ground us as we bounce between radically different lives and eras all across the globe.
Section 2. The four-color computer proof, a paradigm shift in mathematics.
And this brilliantly illustrates a massive turning point. So for literally centuries, mathematics relied entirely on human calculation. It was all pure thought and handwritten proofs. But then, on June 21, 1976, the old way violently collided with the new way. Kenneth Apple and Wolfgang announced they had proved the famous four-color conjecture. That's the idea that you only need four colors to fill in any map without bordering countries sharing a color. But here's the kicker. They didn't do it alone. They proved it with the help of a computer. This was a total paradigm shift. It was actually the very first major theorem proved using a computer, and it fundamentally changed the entire relationship between mathematician and machine forever.
This shift to computer-aided proofs beautifully connects to a thought from Ferdinand Rudio. Now, Rudio was a mathematician who, quite fittingly for us, died on June 21, 1929. He once wrote about Leonhard Euler, noting that before Euler, it was not yet known how to let the formulas speak for themselves. He was talking about mathematical notation back then, but fast forward to 1976, and Apple and Haken evolved the tools even further. By using computers to crunch these endless possibilities, they once again found a totally new way to let the math, speak for itself.
Section 3. Tragedy, war, and secrets, the dramatic stakes of mathematical lives.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the sheer scale of this historical secret. What you're looking at is the timeline of Wolfgang Doeblin, an incredibly brilliant mathematician. In February 1940, while he was serving as a soldier during World War II, he sealed his mathematical research inside an envelope and sent it off to the Academy of Sciences in Paris. Later, that very same year, tragically, he died in the war. And that envelope, it sat completely unopened for 60 years. When they finally unsealed it in the year 2000, the mathematical community was absolutely stunned. Tucked inside were the foundations of modern stochastic calculus. It even included a version of what we now know as Ito's formula. And he was doing this work in his spare time, literally on the battlefield. Just incredible.
We see another really intense intersection of mathematics and historical conflict with Maurice Audin. He was a mathematician and a pacifist who disappeared during the Algerian War after being arrested on June 11, 1957. The source documents detail how the academic community responded to their colleague going missing. In what was a completely unprecedented move, Audin's doctoral thesis on linear transformations in Banach spaces was actually defended at the Sorbonne in absentia. A colleague stood up, presented his results on the board, and the jury awarded him his PhD posthumously.
For decades, the exact circumstances surrounding his disappearance remained a point of major contention, and his wife Josette campaigned tirelessly to get to the truth. That agonizing wait lasted all the way until 2018. That's when French President Emmanuel Macron issued an official statement recognizing that Audin was tortured and executed by the soldiers who arrested him. It's a stark, sobering reminder of the immense human stakes involved here and the harsh realities that can sometimes intrude upon a scholar's life.
Section 4. The Mathematician King, an extraordinary life of service and royalty.
Okay, moving from war-torn Europe over to Nigeria, we find a life that defies literally every single expectation you might have of a scholar. Just look at this staggering variety of titles held by Chukwuka Okonjo. We're talking about a mathematician who studied in Germany, an economist, and a United Nations director who installed the very first African Population Information Network. During the Biafran War, he served as a brigadier in the Biafran army, and then later in life, he became the Obi, or king, of Ogweshi Ukwu. I mean, it definitively proves that a life devoted to mathematics can be wildly diverse, deeply embedded in public service, and completely unexpected.
So how did he actually apply his math in the real world? Well, Okonjo's work was highly practical. In his 1964 paper on demographic patterns and population growth in Nigeria, he laid out this really clear logical flow. First up, he analyzed the available census data from the 1950s and 60s. Next, he applied mathematical models, specifically the logistic curve, to really understand the pattern of that growth. And finally, he combined different levels of fertility and mortality variables to project the future of the Nigerian population. He was literally using math to build the foundation for his country's development.
But of course, his royal life wasn't isolated from the harsh realities of modern politics. In December 2012, his wife, Queen Kamini Okonjo, was kidnapped right from the royal palace by armed men. She was 82 years old at the time and was held for 5 days before being freed. The sources note that the kidnappers explicitly targeted her because her daughter, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, was Nigeria's finance minister at the time and was enacting some very strict economic policies. It's a really vivid vignette that grounds Okonjo's extraordinary larger-than-life story in a stark modern reality.
Section 5. Mathematics in Nature. The mathematical beauty of biological forms. Let's move to our final figure and see how this all builds together. Darcy Thompson was a truly unique scholar, a zoologist, a classicist, and a mathematician, and he passed away on, you guessed it, June 21st, 1948. Back in 1917, he published this groundbreaking book called On Growth and Form. It was absolutely revolutionary because it attempted to reduce complex biological phenomena down to pure mathematics. He basically argued that the physical shapes of plants and animals weren't just these random evolutionary accidents. Instead, they were dictated by the exact same physical forces and mathematical laws that govern the rest of the universe. So the crucial point here is exactly how he connected these two seemingly different worlds. Thompson would look at the beautiful sweeping curve of a nautilus shell or the perfect hexagonal cells of a bee's honeycomb, and he'd actually criticize other zoologists for just brushing those shapes off as instinct or biological mystery. Instead, he mapped them directly to mathematics. He showed how the shell perfectly follows the equation of a logarithmic spiral, and how the honeycomb is basically a masterclass in minimizing surface area. He brought the stripped rigor of geometry straight into the study of life. It's brilliant.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer. We've traveled from computer lobs in 1976, through the deep tragedies of war in the 1940s and 50s, over to a royal palace in Nigeria, and finally right down to the geometrical spirals of a seashell. And the whole shebang is connected by the single thread of June 21st. So I want to leave you with this final thought. Mathematics is not just a collection of cold, hard facts. It is a living, breathing human endeavor. Next time you look at an equation, ask yourself, whose life story, whose struggles, whose absolute genius is hidden behind the math? Thank you so much for exploring these stories with me today. Keep asking questions and keep looking for that human element in everything.